Now it's time to talk to an old friend, Cliff Schecter. But no, we're not doing Republican sex debates today, which would be fun, of course. But we're going to do a very important issue. It's actually something that was on the ballot in Ohio. Now, the election's already happened, so you're saying, why are you discussing it now post-elections? Because I think it teaches a valuable lesson about how our system works. So, and Cliff knows the most about it, so that's why we want to bring him on. Cliff, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Cenk?
All right, great.
I just want to make sure you know that you're just as American as the rest of us, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sorry, I was reading your diary, Coast. Good job, as always.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that as well. Oh, and if everybody else wants to check it out, I'm not saying anything. It's just on theyoungturks.com. So read that as well over there on that side. Okay, so Cliff, what was issue 2 in Ohio? Let's set that up first. What was it?
Sure. What it is, was a power grab by big agriculture, quite frankly. The big corporate ag guys who, don't want to make sure that what they do, how they grow their food, how they treat it, how they keep animals, cannot be regulated by anyone. So you had a situation here where those decisions are made by the state legislature in accordance with the Department of Agriculture, and people would have a say in what occurs via ballot initiative here. So what they decided to do was to place a constitutional amendment on the ballot, which they did in record speed here. There were literally almost no hearings in the state house and state senate here because, quite frankly, they have a lot of money and bought everybody off. And I'm sorry if that language is too harsh, but that's just what it is. And both establishments, the Republican and Democratic establishments, quite frankly, and they got this constitutional amendment placed on the ballot, so people, without people really knowing what it was, and then spent over $4 million in a period of a few months going out and telling everybody that it was about safe, locally grown food, when in fact it could not have been more the opposite. I like to say it's akin to healthy forests, clear skies, and mission accomplished.
So what exactly did the amendment actually do?
What it did was it took all the power away from the Department of Agriculture, away from the legislature, and away from any ballot initiative that people might want to place on to regulate big ag. And it said that the governor would now have the right to appoint a board, 13 members, and 10 of them, by the way, would be appointed by the governor, another one by the state house, another one by the state senate, another one would be, an animal rights, one seat on the board. So essentially 10 of the 13 are being appointed by the governor. And these guys can make the decisions in a back room somewhere. They're not transparent. For all we know, they can be people who sit on the board of DuPont, which shockingly, Pioneer Hybrid, a company based in Iowa, a big ag company that is now owned by DuPont, gave $100,000 to this effort. I'm sure that'll shock everybody. And so these guys can be appointed to this board, and they can make these decisions, and there's no right, because it's a constitutional amendment, it overrides anything in the department. So guys who are in the Department of Health or Agriculture that would have more expertise on this, doesn't matter. People who, the legislature, assuming that people were actually elected that haven't been bought off by them, doesn't matter. If people choose to speak through ballot initiative, doesn't matter. You've got to literally the only way you can undo this is via another constitutional amendment.
So, Cliff, I know you lobbied against this, right? So,
lobbied, but I was hired as a consultant. With about 2.5 weeks before the campaign to go against it. So,
I got you.
Full disclosure, I would work on the other side of it, absolutely. But we spent $100,000 our side. It so often happens in the progressive side. We spent $100,000, they spent $4 million. So we were outspent 40 to 1.
So I want to get to that in a quick second. But what was it that you guys wanted? What do you think is the better way of handling that kind of regulation?
Well, what happened was, the Humane Society and some other organizations came in here. Remember, this is an issue that has to do with how animals are kept, and so there are people that will care because it has to do with animal cruelty, animals stuffed into small crates where they literally can't turn around, they can't stretch their wings if they're birds. It deals with those issues, but it deals with so many other issues. There's an article a couple of weeks ago in New York Times Magazine about a woman perfectly healthy, I think in her 20s, who ate a hamburger one night and is now paralyzed for the rest of her life because of E. coli. She got hit by E. coli, and it was because in one of these factory farms, these huge factory farms. We're talking about, there's one here in Ohio that has 25 million birds on it, so just think about that for a second. they didn't clean things properly. So it has to do with public health. There's a lot of evidence now, and it's growing, that swine flu, H1N1, is a byproduct of how animals are kept.
Right, but how would you regulate it, Cliff?
Okay, sorry. What they want to do, so with all of this in mind, in Michigan, for example, the Humane Society came in and other groups and sat down with the owners of factory farms, and they came up with some procedures. They sat down together and worked it out so that, there would be regulations, but they wouldn't be so stringent as to put these guys out of business. Obviously, these guys are making gazillions of dollars, so it'd be reasonable regulations, so they're not piling animals on top of each other, and so that there are some more safeguards against unclean practices, environmental safeguards because some of the spillage when you've got 25 million chickens on a farm, and you can guess that probably would create a lot of poop.
I hear you on that. So, Cliff,
handled properly, that gets into our drinking water, right?
Right.
So that's all it was. And in Michigan, they handled it the right way. But what happened here was, when the Humane Society and others came in here to talk to them about it, they responded by saying, okay, let's talk about it. And then behind their backs, immediately, when I say they, I mean big agriculture, getting this constitutional amendment placed on the ballot by the legislature.
The reason I find that interesting, Cliff, is because, look, you come in with your $100,000 trying to beat this back. They've got $4 million. I saw in the charts, mostly by very large agricultural firms that have donated to that.
Interest groups, right?
And interest groups. There are special interest groups. And
National Pork Producers Council, stuff like that.
Yeah. Right. So, since they have the money, it's easy for them to overpower you guys, and they buy more ads, and they tell people, oh, no, we're coming in to regulate this, when in fact they're trying to do the opposite. And two, the other interesting lesson I got out of it is they think it's easier to buy the governor, a single politician, and get 10 people on the board that's on their side than to do it in another way. So is that something that we got to look out for in the future?
It is, because here's what they said. It was in a number of newspapers here that this was a model for what they plan to do around the rest of the country, and that's why it's so important for people listening to this show from all around the country to understand this, that you guys out in California passed Proposition 2, which scared them because it regulated factory farms. And a few other states, Arizona, Florida, and then Michigan, had the compromise. So these guys decided that they were going to preempt reasonable regulation. And as we all know, as we've learned from Wall Street and other places, when these guys get to regulate themselves, it always works out really well for consumers, doesn't it? So they realize, as we all know, that when power is put in the executive, it's always more dangerous. I mean, the legislature, no matter how bought off or whatever, is always going to be closer to the people. When you put power in the hands of an executive, whether it's making decisions of whether to stay in Afghanistan or whether it's deciding if they're going to listen to the corporate guys with big money who are saying, nah, don't regulate the farms, it's okay, or that you are going to regulate them, we know who they're going to put on the board. And sadly, in the state of Ohio, the Democrats are just as guilty as Republicans. If this is not, people want to try to blame Republicans, well, you can't, because our Democratic governor, our Democratic state house speaker, and others were right there with the Republicans.
So, and then in the end, Cliff, obviously they won, right?
Yes, they won. I mean, quite frankly, we got 37% of the vote, and for a 2.5-week, $100,000 campaign, I was pretty damn happy with that. And hopefully that's something to build upon in the future. But I want to make sure that other people, other states, don't get hit suddenly by this kind of a thing. And, activists out there who are listening, who care about the food they eat, who care about their health and the health of their families, who care about the environment, will be ready for this kind of thing. And hopefully when you hear something that sounds too good, a board's going to be put in place of agricultural experts, placed in there by the governor who will protect our local food, sniff a rat where there is one, quite frankly.
I got you. And you know what? It makes sense for them, too, because it's more cost-effective to buy one politician than to buy a lot of them. So they just go pour money into governors, and mission accomplished, and that's how it works. All right, Cliff, thanks for the warning for what's coming ahead. We appreciate it, and always good to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me on, and after this serious edition, we'll have to get back to more Republican sexual habits in the future.
All right, sounds good. It's a plan.
Take care, buddy.
All right, take care. Young Turks.
Watch the live show at theyoungturks.com.